Beloved, we have gathered today not to learn something new, but to remember something ancient, something the soul has always known, yet the mind has forgotten. For thousands of years, humanity has been praying, pleading, begging for help, and yet the world remains filled with fear, illness, conflict, and lack. This alone tells us something, not that prayer is powerless, but that humanity has misunderstood prayer from the very beginning. You see, the great tragedy of spiritual life is not that God is distant, but that we believe God is distant. And because we believe it, we pray as though the infinite were somewhere far away, somewhere outside ourselves, somewhere needing to be summoned, persuaded, convinced. We pray as though the divine were asleep and must be awakened, or reluctant and must be urged, or absent and must be called. And this, dear one, is the great misunderstanding. For as long as prayer is directed to God, it cannot reveal God. As long as prayer begins with a sense of separation, it cannot bring forth union. As long as we stand as a creature crying out to a creator, we cannot know the truth that sets us free. Look gently within your own experience. How many times have you prayed from fear and found only more fear? How many times have you prayed from lack and found lack multiply? How many times have you pleaded for peace while trembling inside? This is not failure. This is simply evidence that prayer, when born of separation, cannot yield the fruit of union. The mistake is not in you. The mistake is in the approach. For centuries, we have prayed to God as though God were missing. We have prayed for healing as though wholeness were absent. We have prayed for supply as though abundance were withheld. And every such prayer begins with a lie, the lie that God is not already present, no matter how sincere your words, no matter how fervent your wish. If the premise of your prayer is separation, the conclusion must be emptiness. This is why so many prayers seem unanswered, not because God has withheld anything, but because we have prayed from a false starting point. You cannot reach God through the consciousness that believes God is absent. You cannot find the infinite by beginning in limitation. You cannot rise into truth while anchored in fear. My beloved friends, hear this with a quiet heart. Prayer is not an attempt to reach God. Prayer is the recognition that God is already here. If God is infinite presence, then where could it be but here? If God is the life of your life, then how could it be apart from you? If God is the soul of your being, then how could you ever be separated? But we have been trained since childhood to pray up to heaven, out into space, toward an external deity. We have been taught to look everywhere except the one place where God may actually be found, within the very consciousness doing the seeking. And so humanity has lived as spiritual beggars, standing before a closed door, not knowing the door was never locked, not realizing that the door itself was within. This is the foundational error that has kept us wandering in circles, praying without peace, asking without receiving, seeking without finding. We have looked outward. We have stretched our arms to the sky when the kingdom was whispered to be within you. You see, the moment you pray to a God outside yourself, you deny the truth of your own being. You deny the words of the Master who said, I and the Father are one. You deny the presence that has never left you, the presence that cannot leave you, the presence that is your very life. This is why I say, and I say it with love, with gentleness, but with spiritual clarity, stop praying to God, not because prayer is wrong, but because the direction of your attention has been misaligned. Stop projecting your good into the distance. Stop imagining the divine as an external power. Stop approaching the infinite as something you must attract, convince, or invoke. For the moment you turn outward, you turn away from the truth. But the moment you pause, the moment you grow still, the moment you turn within, not asking, not pleading, simply recognizing, that is the moment prayer becomes real. That is the moment your soul remembers. That is the moment when the presence, long ignored, becomes felt. So let this be the beginning of our journey together, a gentle, sincere acknowledgement that the God you have been seeking is the God that has never left you. The answers you prayed for in the sky are actually held within your own awareness. The peace you have tried to call forth with words is already resting quietly at the center of your being. Today, we begin the shift from praying outwardly to recognizing inwardly, from striving to resting, from seeking to seeing, from separation to union. This is the great correction. This is the beginning of true prayer. This is where the infinite way opens before us. Beloved, let us look more deeply now into this matter of prayer. For if we are to understand why prayer so often seems powerless, we must first understand the invisible assumption that lies beneath it, the assumption that God is somewhere else. Humanity has prayed for thousands of years from this assumption. Entire religions have been built upon it. And yet, the very moment you believe God is separate from you, you have stepped out of truth and into illusion. You have created a distance that does not exist, and then you suffer within the space of your own imagination. This is the root of all failed prayer. Traditional prayer begins with the premise that God is absent, or silent, or withholding, or waiting to act. And so the individual prays from the standpoint of need, of fear, of desire, of longing. But in doing so, the individual confirms, often unconsciously, the belief that the divine is not already the essence of their being. And that belief, more than any lack of faith, is the barrier to answered prayer. You must see this clearly. Prayer becomes ineffective the moment you begin it with the assumption that God must be summoned, for the God you try to summon is the God you do not believe is already present. And the God you do not believe is present cannot reveal himself to your consciousness. Not because God is absent, but because your belief in absence closes the door of awareness. Imagine for a moment a wave praying to the ocean to come closer. Imagine the leaf praying for connection to the tree. Imagine the sunlight praying for union with the sun. This is what humanity has done for centuries. We have prayed to the very presence that is already living us, breathing us, sustaining us. We have prayed for that which cannot be separated from us, not for a moment, not for an instant, not in birth, not in death, not in the darkest night, nor in the brightest awakening. And yet we pray as though disconnected. That is why the Master taught so emphatically, the kingdom of God is within you, not above you, not beyond you, not waiting in the heavens for you to reach some level of worthiness. No, within you, here and now, closer than your beating heart, nearer than your breath. So long, however, as you pray to a God outside yourself, you cannot hear the God within. So long as you cry upward, you cannot listen inward. So long as you ask for a response from the sky, you miss the whisper in your soul. Traditional prayer fails because the seeker begins with a false identity. He prays as a mortal, asking the immortal to act. He prays as a separate self, asking the all to intervene. He prays as an incomplete being, hoping the complete will fix him. But prayer, in its true essence, cannot begin in separation. It must begin where God already is, within consciousness. It must begin not from emptiness, but from recognition, not from fear, but from awareness, not from striving, but from surrender. When you pray to a God outside yourself, you inadvertently affirm your own powerlessness. And what you affirm in consciousness expresses itself in experience. Fear reinforces fear. Lack reinforces lack. Distance reinforces distance. This is why people pray for peace and find their minds still troubled. This is why they pray for abundance and discover their worries unchanged. This is why they pray for healing and still feel the sting of fear within their hearts. The problem is not the sincerity of their prayer, it is the direction of their prayer. Consider this. Every time you ask God to come to you, you quietly confess that God is not already where you are. And every such confession closes the very door you are trying to open. There is no such thing as a God who is far off. There is no such thing as a presence that must travel to you. There is no such thing as a divine love that waits to be convinced. God is the life of your life, the mind of your mind, the soul of your soul. It is not God who must come nearer. It is you who must turn inward, not to find God, but to recognize the presence that never left you. When prayer fails, it is never because God did not hear. It is because the individual prayed from a consciousness that could not hear God. This is why Jesus turned away from public prayer, why he prayed in secret, in silence, in the quiet of his own heart. He was not asking for something. He was entering into the awareness of what already is. His prayer was union, not request, recognition, not petition. And so I say to you gently, tenderly, without judgment, traditional prayer fails not because God is silent, but because we are speaking from a place that does not know him. Once the illusion of separation is dissolved, prayer becomes not a cry to heaven, but a resting in heaven, not a plea for God's attention, but an awakening to God's presence, not a search for the divine, but a surrender into the divine. This is the beginning of true prayer. This is the end of separation. This is where the spiritual life actually begins. Beloved, there comes a moment in every sincere seeker's path when the old way simply no longer works, when the prayers we once trusted feel empty, when the formulas we repeated bring no peace, when the God we have sought outside ourselves refuses to appear because we are seeking where he cannot be found. When this moment comes, you stand at a spiritual crossroads, and if you listen not with the mind but with the depths of your being, you will hear a quiet invitation to turn, not outward, but inward. This turning is the beginning of true prayer. It is the moment the soul awakens, the moment the illusion of separation begins to dissolve. This is the turning point Joel Goldsmith spoke of so often, the sacred shift from praying to God to praying from God. Now, let us understand this clearly and without confusion. To pray from God does not mean to imagine yourself divine in egoic arrogance. It means to recognize humbly and reverently that you are never separate from the infinite life that animates your being. It means to pray as one who is already within the presence, not as one trying to enter it. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he was revealing the foundation of all true spiritual practice. He was not making a statement of personal greatness. He was unveiling the universal truth of all being. He was speaking of your relationship with the infinite, my relationship with the infinite, the relationship of every soul who has ever lived or will ever live, To pray from God is to begin your prayer with this truth, not as a doctrine to believe, but as a reality to be recognized. Consider what happens inwardly when you say, I and the Father are one. Not as affirmation, not as repetition, but as recognition. Something subtle shifts, something quiet but profound awakens. Fear loosens its grip because fear cannot stand in the presence of oneness. Lack begins to dissolve because lack has no place in the infinite. Pain loses its authority, for pain cannot rule where divine wholeness is realized. In that inner recognition, prayer becomes effortless. No pleading is necessary. No convincing is required. No emotional intensity is helpful. Instead, prayer becomes a resting, a gentle sinking into the truth of your own being. It becomes communion, not communication. You see, praying to God assumes God is outside you. Praying from God acknowledges God as the very essence of your being. When you pray from God, you are not attempting to reach the divine. You are expressing from the divine. You are not stretching your hands toward heaven. You are speaking from heaven. You are not calling for light. You are resting in the light, already shining at the center of your consciousness. This is why Goldsmith taught that the highest prayer is silent. For what could words add to the presence? How could language improve upon the infinite? When you pray from God, there is nothing to say because there is nothing to add to completeness. To pray from God is to shift from I need to God is, from give me to I rest in, from come to me to I and the Father are one. This is not an intellectual shift, it is a spiritual one. It is not a change of thought, it is a change of consciousness. It is the moment you stop trying to bring God into your experience and realize God is your experience, the life that lives you, the breath that breathes you, the presence that sustains you. When you pray from God, you no longer approach prayer as a transaction. You approach it as recognition. Recognition of the infinite, invisible, the divine presence that cannot be seen with the eyes, yet is more real than anything the senses can detect. There is no distance to cross. There is no separation to heal. There is no God to attract. There is only the unveiling of what already is. This is the meaning of mystical prayer. This is the heart of the infinite way. This is the turning point from which your entire life begins to shift, not through effort, but through awareness, not through striving, but through surrender, not through seeking, but through seeing. And so, dear one, when you enter prayer today, do not begin with what you think you lack. Do not begin with what you fear. Do not begin with the problem. Begin with God. Begin with presence. Begin with the truth that must be recognized before anything can be revealed. I and the Father are one. The presence is here. All that God is expressing itself as the life I am. From this foundation, real prayer begins. From this foundation, real peace flows. From this foundation, the old way falls away and the new life begins. Beloved, now that we understand the turning from praying to God toward praying from God, we must enter into the very heart of the infinite way, the practice of recognition, not affirmation, not imagination, not concentration, recognition. For all spiritual unfolding begins with one simple truth. God is already here, not approaching, not arriving, not responding, already here fully, completely, indivisibly, The divine presence is not something you must call, it is something you must notice. And because this presence is not loud, not forceful, not dramatic, it is recognized only in stillness, not the forced stillness that suppresses thought, but the natural stillness that arises when the mind yields to something deeper than itself. This is what Goldsmith meant by the practice of the presence. It is not a discipline of effort. It is a discipline of remembrance. It is the gentle turning of the inner eye toward what has always been true. It is the surrender of the mind's frantic searching into the quiet knowing of the soul. You enter the practice of recognition the way you return to breath, not by effort, but by awareness. Let us walk together into this stillness, as though guiding the soul back to its own center. First, become quiet, not perfectly quiet, not forcefully quiet, simply quiet enough to notice what lies beneath the noise. Thoughts may swirl, the body may shift, emotions may stir. This does not matter, for none of these are the presence. They are only surface movements. Beneath them, beneath the thoughts, beneath the sensations, beneath the concerns of the human mind, there is a living silence, a subtle radiance, a quiet isness that is never disturbed. That is the presence. That is the Christ within you. That is the consciousness from which all true prayer arises. The practice of recognition is the act of turning your attention inward to acknowledge this truth. God is the substance of my being. The presence is here. I and the Father are one. Do not repeat these words mechanically. Do not strain to believe them. Simply allow them to be the doorway through which awareness passes. Then gently release the words, for the presence lies beyond language. In this inner turning, something shifts, not always dramatically, not always immediately, but inevitably. You begin to sense a quiet aliveness, a subtle warmth, a peace that does not come from the world. It may be faint at first, like a whisper at the edge of hearing, but it is there. This is the presence announcing itself. And in this moment of recognition, prayer has already begun. For prayer is not your words to God, it is your awareness of God. Prayer is not petition, it is perception. Prayer is not asking, it is seeing. When you recognize the presence, you step out of the world of appearances and into the realm of reality. You step out of fear and into peace. You step out of human limitation and into divine assurance. This is why Goldsmith insisted that you begin every day, not with plans, not with concerns, not with tasks, but with recognition. For if you begin the day in recognition, the day unfolds in harmony. But if you begin from the mind's anxious activity, the day unfolds in confusion. A single moment of recognition is more powerful than hours of affirmations. One breath of awareness carries more spiritual potency than 1,000 spoken prayers, for the presence responds not to effort, but to opening, not to repetition, but to receptivity. Let us make this clear. Recognition does not create God's presence. It reveals it. Recognition does not summon the divine. It uncovers the divine already here. You cannot create what already exists. You cannot summon what is already present. You cannot awaken what has never slept. But you can recognize what your mind has overlooked. You can yield to what your heart already knows. You can return to the center of your being, where the infinite dwells in perpetual stillness. This is the secret. This is the practice. This is the way. When worry arises, return to recognition. When fear whispers, return to recognition. When challenges appear, return to recognition. When blessings come, remain in recognition. Recognition becomes the thread that weaves your life into harmony. Over time, this practice becomes natural, effortless, uncontrived. You find yourself turning within spontaneously. You find the presence meeting you before you even call. You find peace arising in moments where old patterns once produced panic. You find solutions unfolding without struggle. For the divine presence, once recognized, begins to reveal its own activity. It moves before you, prepares the way, harmonizes conditions, dissolves obstacles, and guides the external world to reflect the internal awareness of God. And so the practice of recognition is not something you do only in meditation. It becomes the atmosphere in which you live, a silent awareness beneath every thought, a constant quiet knowing, God is here, God is my life, God is the reality of all being. This is the entrance into the kingdom. This is the doorway to spiritual realization. This is the foundation upon which all true unfoldment rests. Beloved, when you begin to recognize the presence within, when you sense, even faintly, the quiet reality of God as your very life, a new way of living opens before you. It is not a path of effort. It is not a path of striving. It is not a path of manipulating conditions or wrestling with circumstances. It is the path of living from God rather than living from fear, from lack, or from the human mind's endless attempts to fix life. You see, the mind has been trained to be a problem solver. From morning until night, it analyzes, measures, worries, plans, strategizes, tries to improve, tries to control. The mind imagines that harmony comes from effort, that order comes from manipulation, that safety comes from vigilance. And so it works tirelessly, yet the more it works, the more problems multiply. Why? Because the mind is trying to solve problems it created through the belief in separation. Every problem is born of the belief that you are a self apart from God. Every fear arises from the belief that you are living life alone. Every struggle emerges from the belief that you must achieve through personal power what only divine presence can unfold. And so long as you identify as the one who must fix everything, you will remain trapped in the world of problems. For the self that tries to solve problems is the very self that perceives them. This is why Goldsmith taught that spiritual living begins when problem-solving ends, not the solving of problems themselves, but the habitual trying to solve them through personal power. You cannot live from God and live from fear simultaneously. You cannot live from divine presence and remain devoted to human control. You must choose your foundation. Living from God means recognizing that there is one life, one presence, one power flowing through all existence, and that this one is the very essence of your being. It means trusting that the same intelligence that governs the universe can govern your individual experience. It means laying down the heavy burden of personal responsibility and allowing the divine activity within you to unfold harmony without interference. This does not mean neglecting your duties. It does not mean ignoring your worldly affairs. It does not mean adopting a passive or irresponsible approach. No, quite the opposite. It means acting from clarity instead of confusion, from peace instead of fear, from guidance instead of guesswork. When you live from God, you act, but your action is inspired rather than anxious, effortless rather than strained. You will discover something extraordinary. When you stop trying to fix life, life fixes itself through the activity of the presence. This is not a metaphor. It is spiritual law. The outer world reorganizes around the consciousness that knows God is its source and substance. Harmony appears not because you forced it, but because you stopped obstructing it. Supply flows not because you demanded it, but because you recognized its spiritual origin. Healing emerges not because you battled disease, but because you rested in divine wholeness. Let me offer you a simple image. A garden irrigated by a steady underground spring does not strain to receive water. It need not beg for moisture. It does not fear the sun or the seasons. It flourishes naturally because the source is already within the soil. You are that garden. God is that spring. Recognition is the opening through which the water flows. When you live from God, you no longer approach problems as forces to be conquered. You approach them as appearances without real power, dissolving in the light of spiritual awareness. The mind may say, "This is a crisis," but the presence quietly whispers, "Be still." The senses may shout, "Act now," but the soul answers, "Rest first." And when you rest in the presence, something miraculous happens. The fear that made the problem seem real is dissolved, and with its dissolution, the problem loses its substance. Solutions appear where complexity once reigned, clarity emerges where confusion once ruled, opportunities unfold where obstacles once stood. This is why Goldsmith insisted that spiritual living is not about managing effects, but recognizing, because the moment you return to the source, the effects naturally realign. The moment you abide in the awareness of God, the outer world follows the inner order. You begin to see that everything in your experience is responding not to your words, not to your effort, not to your anxiety, but to the state of consciousness you are dwelling in. The world before you is a mirror of the world within you, live from fear, and fear reflects itself back. Live from effort, and struggle multiplies. Live from God, and harmony becomes your companion. Let this be understood deeply. You do not solve problems by addressing the problems. You solve them by returning to the presence. This is the end of problem solving. This is the end of human strain. This is the beginning of spiritual living. And so I say to you, when challenges arise, as they will do, not rush outward with worry. Do not wrestle with conditions. Do not allow the mind to drag you into its frantic labor. Instead, turn inward, recognize the presence, rest in the quiet assurance that God is the only power, the only life, the only reality. Then act. If action arises not from fear, but from divine impulse, this is living from God. This is living by grace. This is the life that unfolds in harmony, without effort, without anxiety, without the constant burden of trying to control what only the infinite can govern. Beloved, as we continue the unfolding of this sacred journey, we come now to the very heart of spiritual realization, the silence. For if you have walked with me this far, you have already begun to sense the futility of praying with words alone, and the power that begins to stir when the mind yields to the inner presence. You have begun to glimpse that true prayer is not something you speak, it is something you become aware of. Words belong to the mind. Silence belongs to the soul. And God, beloved, is not heard by the mind. God is heard only in the stillness of the soul. This is why spoken prayers, no matter how sincere, cannot reveal the fullness of the divine presence. Words come from the surface of consciousness. They come from thought, from emotion, from desire, from the human sense of need. But the presence we seek dwells beneath all thought. beneath all emotion, beneath all seeking. It is found only where the mind stops and the heart begins to listen. To enter the true prayer, you must step beyond all formulation, beyond the prayers you learned in childhood, beyond the affirmations you memorized, beyond the rituals and repetitions. These may have brought comfort. They may have brought guidance, but they cannot bring union. For union is not achieved through the mind. Union is realized when the mind becomes still enough to perceive what has always been. The silent prayer is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of God. When Jesus withdrew to the mountains, when he prayed alone in the night, when he entered the solitary place, he was not speaking to God, he was entering God, he was listening, he was resting in the infinite invisible. His silence was communion, not communication. And so it must be with us. Let the world keep its loud prayers. Let the senses keep their demands. Let the mind keep its noise. You, beloved, enter the silence, not to escape the world, but to reveal the reality that governs the world. The silent prayer begins with recognition. The presence is here, not far off, not approaching, here closer than breath, deeper than thought, more intimate than your own sense of self. As you rest in this awareness, thoughts may come, let them pass. Emotions may arise, let them drift. Memories may surface, let them go. Do not resist them. Do not chase them. You are not trying to empty the mind. You are learning to see through it. Imagine sitting beside a river. The water flows, leaves pass, twigs drift. You do not try to stop the river. You simply observe, unmoved. In the same way, in the silence, thoughts are the river. The mind flows, but your attention is resting in the presence beneath all movement. Eventually, something subtle happens. You become aware of an inner quiet, not a forced quiet, not a disciplined quiet, but a natural quiet, as though something in you has finally exhaled. In that quiet, you feel a gentle peace not created, not imagined, simply felt. It arises by itself because it has always been there. This peace is the beginning of communion. It is not emotional. It is not physical. It is not mental. It is spiritual. It is the soul recognizing its own source. It is the beginning of the merging of the visible with the invisible, the finite with the infinite, the seeker with the sought. And then, in that peace, something even more mysterious happens. You become aware of a presence not separate from you, not above you, not greater than you, but the very essence of your being. You cannot describe it. You cannot define it. You cannot explain it, but you know it, and its knowing fills you, surrounds you, enfolds you. This is God as felt presence. This is the Christ realized within. This is the heart of the silent prayer. You are no longer praying to God. You are no longer speaking to God. You are no longer seeking God. You are resting in God. You are being lived by God. You are allowing the infinite to reveal itself as your own consciousness. This is the prayer that heals without words. This is the prayer that guides without commands. This is the prayer that supplies without requests. This is the prayer that transforms without effort. This is the prayer that dissolves fear, not because you banished it, but because fear cannot exist in the presence of the real. When you enter the silent prayer, you are entering communion, union with the source. Communion is not achieved by volume, not by intensity, not by pleading, but by quiet recognition. Silence is not empty. Silence is full. It is full of God. It is full of truth. It is full of the infinite, invisible. The human mind cannot comprehend this. It asks, but what do I do? What do I say? How do I know it is working? Beloved, you do nothing. You say nothing. You simply listen. Not with ears, but with your being. You simply rest, not in passivity, but in awareness. You simply abide in the presence, and the presence does the work. For it is the Father within me that doeth the works, not the mind, not the body, not the ego, the presence. When you touch this silence, even for a moment, you have entered the true prayer. And that moment does more for your life, your health, your supply, your relationships, your understanding, than months of verbal petition. For silence is the language of God, beloved. When you begin to pray from God, when prayer shifts from petition to recognition, from striving to resting, from words to silence, your entire life undergoes a transformation so deep, so subtle, and yet so unmistakably real that you cannot help but see the hand of the infinite moving through every facet of experience. This transformation does not come all at once. It does not arrive with thunder, nor does it announce itself with noise or spectacle. It emerges the way dawn emerges, gradual, certain, inevitable, until you look around and realize that the darkness you once feared has quietly dissolved into light, and it all begins within. For when prayer arises from the recognition that God is already the life of your life, the mind softens, the heart opens, and the soul finds its resting place. And from this inner foundation, your outer world reshapes itself without your manipulation, without your strain, without your constant interference. Let us look gently at how life begins to change. First, you notice that fear loses its authority. Problems that once terrified you no longer hold the same weight. It is not that challenges disappear. It is that they no longer appear as threats. You begin to see them as shadows cast by the mind, powerless to disturb the presence that lives within you. You find yourself responding to life instead of reacting to it. Waves that once overwhelmed you now pass without pulling you under. Second, you discover clarity where confusion once ruled. When you pray from God, decisions no longer come from worry, pressure, or mental calculation. They arise from a quiet knowing, a gentle inner impulse that guides you more surely than logic ever could. You act from peace, not anxiety. You move from intuition, not fear. You walk through life with a quiet assurance that the infinite is directing your steps. Third, relationships begin to shift. When you no longer look to others to complete you, approve of you, or rescue you, you approach them from fullness rather than need. You see beyond their behavior into their true identity, the same divine presence expressed in another form. This recognition dissolves conflict at its root. People respond differently to you. Love becomes natural. Forgiveness becomes effortless. You no longer carry burdens or resentments, for you no longer believe the illusion of separation. Fourth, your sense of supply transforms. When you live from God, you stop believing that money, people, or circumstances are your source. You no longer chase security in outer forms. Instead, you recognize infinite supply as a spiritual reality, always present, always available, always flowing through whatever channel is needed. And as you rest in this truth, external channels appear effortlessly, unexpected income, new opportunities, harmonious solutions. You discover that supply is not something you earn, it is something that unfolds through consciousness. Fifth, healing becomes natural. When you stop trying to fix the body and begin recognizing your true identity as spiritual being, the body begins to respond to the harmony of the presence within. For the body is not the cause of illness, consciousness is. And as your consciousness becomes filled with peace, love, and recognition of divine wholeness, the body reflects this inner truth. Healing may come quickly or gradually, but it comes not through force, but through spiritual alignment. Sixth, time loses its oppressive weight. You stop feeling rushed, behind, overwhelmed. You no longer fight the clock, for you have stepped into the timeless realm of the spirit. Things unfold when they need to unfold. You discover that when you live from presence, there is always enough time, enough energy, enough space for what is truly yours to do. You enter the rhythm of grace rather than the pressure of urgency. Seventh, and most profound of all, is the birth of inner peace, a peace not dependent on conditions, not dependent on outcomes, not dependent on anything external. This peace is the unmistakable sign that you are living from God. It arises not because life has become perfect, but because you have stopped seeking perfection in the world. You have found the center. You have discovered the kingdom within. This peace travels with you. It walks before you. It fills the spaces between your thoughts. It holds you in moments where old habits would have created fear. It becomes the foundation upon which you stand, the atmosphere in which you live, the state of consciousness out of which your entire life unfolds. You see, beloved, when you pray from God, when you live in recognition of the divine presence, the world cannot help but reflect that recognition. Outer changes are not the goal. They are the inevitable consequence of inner realization. You are no longer living as a human trying to reach God. You are living as one who knows God is the very ground of your being, and because God is the cause, the effect your life must reveal, harmony. This is the mystery. This is the miracle. This is the natural result of praying from the presence. Beloved, if you have journeyed with me through these understandings, you are now ready for something sacred, not the theory of prayer, not the idea of communion, but the actual experience of resting in the presence. For spiritual truth is not fully grasped when heard. It is known when lived, when felt, when entered. And so in this moment, let us step gently together into the silent prayer as it was practiced by the mystics, by those who touched the infinite and found it within themselves. We do not do this as ritual, nor as technique, nor as spiritual effort. We do this as recognition. The presence is already here. We are not calling God to come. We are turning our attention to what is. Let us begin. Be very still, not outwardly only, but inwardly. Let the mind soften. Let the breath slow. Do not attempt to stop thought. Let everything be exactly as it is. And now, gently, without strain, let one simple awareness dawn in your heart. God is here, not far away, not someday, not descending from above, here, as the very life within you. Do not try to feel it. Do not try to imagine it. Simply acknowledge it. God is here. This presence is the reality of my being. Stay with this. No words needed beyond this recognition. No effort needed beyond this awareness. Let the mind wander if it wishes. Let thoughts pass like birds crossing a wide, open sky. The sky is not concerned with the birds. You are not concerned with the thoughts. Now, turn your attention not to something, but from something, from the outer world, from the senses, from the mind's concerns. Withdraw inwardly, the way a wave withdraws into the ocean before rising again. You are not withdrawing from life. You are withdrawing from illusion. You are entering the deep place where the infinite dwells. Be still. Be very still. Now, gently become aware of something subtle, something quiet, something alive. A presence, a stillness, a peace, a living silence. It is not your peace. It is not your silence. It is not your presence. It is the presence. The same presence that sustained the prophets, that illumined the mystics, that strengthened Jesus in the wilderness, that whispered to Elijah, not in the storm, nor the earthquake, nor the fire, but in the still small voice. Do not try to hear that voice. Simply recognize that it is here. Now rest. Rest in this awareness. The Father within me is the life, the intelligence, the substance of all being. Let this awareness sink beneath thought. Let it settle into the depth of your being. Let it hold you. You do not need to reach God. God is already the center of your consciousness. You do not need to think your way into truth. Truth is revealing itself from within. Now notice something. The sense of me begins to soften. The sense of I begins to expand. The boundaries of your being begin to dissolve. You feel not emotionally, but spiritually that you are resting in something vast, something infinite, something that is not separate from you but includes you. This, beloved, is communion, not the mind speaking to God, but the soul resting in God. Now simply remain in this silence for a moment longer. No words, no desire, no seeking, only presence, only God. And now slowly, without breaking the silence inwardly, let your awareness return to the room, to the body, to the breath, but do not leave the presence. Bring the presence with you. Let it surround your thoughts. Let it infuse your senses. Let it follow you like a soft glow around your being. This is the essence of spiritual practice. Not hours of technique, not formulas, not words, but recognition. This is the prayer that heals. This is the prayer that guides. This is the prayer that opens the way before you without struggle. This is the prayer Jesus lived. Do you see now? You have not learned to pray. You have returned to what prayer truly is. Not talking to God, but resting in God. Not thinking truth, but beholding truth. This is the infinite way. This is the silent communion. This is the life that unfolds from the center. This is the beginning of your transformation. Beloved, as we come to the close of this sacred unfolding, let us understand something essential. A spiritual teaching does not end when the words end. A teaching like this does not culminate in knowledge, or in theory, or in inspiration alone. A spiritual teaching becomes alive only when you live it. When the truth ceases to be a concept and becomes your atmosphere, your foundation, your daily breath, everything we have explored together, every recognition, every silence, every turning within is not meant for a moment of upliftment, but for a lifetime of remembrance. For the presence we have touched is not a momentary visitor. It is your own being. It is the center from which your life is meant to unfold. When you leave this teaching, do not leave the presence. When you return to your responsibilities, do not return alone. When you move back into the world of form, do so with the quiet awareness that the invisible walks with you, within you, as you. This is the secret of all spiritual realization. God goes before you because God is in you. The purpose of these moments together has not been to give you something new, but to unveil what has always been yours. You have not been given a method. You have been shown a way of being. You have not been taught what to say to God. You have learned how to listen. You have not discovered a higher power outside yourself. You have discovered the divine presence that is yourself. And so I leave you with this gentle truth. You do not need long hours of meditation. You do not need perfect concentration. You do not need spiritual eloquence or metaphysical mastery. What you need, what all of us need, is remembrance. One moment of recognition is enough to open the door. One pause in the midst of worry is enough to shift your reality. One breath in which you say, "The presence is here," is enough to dissolve fear. One silent acknowledgement of the Christ within you can change the direction of an entire day. This journey is not about quantity. It is about sincerity. It is about consistency. It is about a heart turned inward instead of outward. Let the world keep its noise. Let the mind keep its chatter. Let the senses keep their appearances. You remember the presence in the morning before the world speaks. Let the inner voice be heard first. Throughout the day, let small pauses become the altar where you return to God. In moments of difficulty, let the silent prayer become your refuge. In moments of joy, let gratitude arise, not for the gift, but for the giver. And when night comes, let your last thought be the same as your first. God is here. I am never separate. The Father within is the life, the light, the substance of all being. If you live this even imperfectly, even simply, even quietly, your life will unfold in ways beyond your imagining. Not always with dramatic miracles, but with grace, with harmony, with right activity, with inner fulfillment, with a peace that does not come and go, but becomes your abiding home. The purpose of prayer is not to change God's will. It is to reveal God's presence. It is to awaken you to the truth that what you have been seeking is the very essence of your being. Remember this, beloved. The transformation does not happen because you have listened to these words. The transformation happens because something within you responded to them. Something ancient, something eternal, something divine. That something is the Christ within. That something is the presence we have spoken of. That something is the kingdom you have been seeking, and it is yours, now, always, forever. So walk gently into your life with this awareness. Let your steps be guided by stillness. Let your decisions arise from peace. Let your actions be expressions of love, and let your days unfold in the rhythm of God's grace. The teaching is not ending here. It is beginning now, in you, as you, through you, carry the presence with you, Carry the silence with you. Carry the kingdom within you. And wherever you go, God goes. Wherever you stand, God stands. Whatever you face, God faces with you. For God is the life you live, the light you shine, the consciousness you are. Beloved, live this truth, and your entire world will bear witness to the glory of the invisible made visible through you.